Great communication is fundamental to great leadership. You can't be a great leader without being a great communicator. Great communication is a fundamental part of it. You can be a great thinker and not be a great communicator. You can be a great strategist and not be a great communicator. But if you're going to lead people, if you're going to be able to inspire people, influence people, engage with people, communication comes at a massive premium. You cannot afford to get it wrong. Some people are naturally gifted. We say, you know, they have the gift of the gab or whatever. But this doesn't preclude people who do not have such natural ability from being able to communicate well. There are indeed a whole heap of very easy techniques that you can put into practice. And interestingly, a lot of them date back to ancient Rome, ancient Greece, classical rhetoric. And these are the kind of techniques that make leaders rise above the maelstrom of monotony and stand above the rest of the crowd. And we see the same techniques, these old techniques been around thousands of years, still being used today, both in political life and in commercial life. I think the key is moving beneath the logic of the argument. So often in corporate life, we're led to think that logic is everything. You must keep emotion out of the workplace, you must keep character out of the workplace. But character and emotion are fundamental to good communication. We need to be able to trust people, we need to be able to care about what they're saying. And if those things are absent, people aren't going to care whether or not the logic is right. So this is what you see great leaders are able to do. They pass the blink test, what I call the blink test, just that 1/10 of a second in which people decide whether or not people are trustworthy or not. They do that, their appearance is right. Barack Obama just looks presidential. Richard Branson, doesn't he look fantastic? Steve Jobs as well. And so they pass that test, but also they're able to construct compelling narratives about what it is that their company does in a way that makes people care about it. If they just say the reason of their company's existence is to make money, it's not going to motivate, inspire or influence the workforce. If they attach it to some bigger, more noble kind of crusade, we're saving lives here, this is what we're doing, then people are going to be motivated. A more motivated workforce, a more productive workforce, greater profits. This is what great leaders do. One of the most difficult challenges, I think, for CEOs to be able to understand what it is that the people that they're speaking to, the people they're trying to win over, are actually thinking about. I think if there's a key, it's really bringing things back to basics. Good CEOs will spend a lot of their time thinking about the real detailed minutiae of their business. And this is something which is very important for them to think about, but when they communicate, they're able to keep it really, really simple. They use simple language, they attach it to emotional themes, they build up their story in such a way that everyone in the audience just cannot resist being pulled in. For instance, like Barack Obama's "Yes, we can" appeal. There's no one on the planet who will have found that difficult to nod along with. Of course, we all want to believe that we can achieve everything together. And so it's tapping into these kind of universal themes, these universal values. That's what great leaders do. That's what great CEOs do. I think that what we find is that it's often communication that makes the difference, marks the difference between the great CEO and the not so great CEO. And so if you look at situations like, for instance, we had the big giants of IT in the 80s and 90s. You had Steve Jobs, who was fantastic. You had Bill Gates, who at that point was not so great. He spoke a language that people didn't really understand. And as a result, Microsoft, for a period, you might remember, it's quite a while ago, but they began being seen really negatively as a kind of monopolistic type company. So I think you see the difference there. We have had a difference in airlines between people like Richard Branson on the one side, a great communicator, and Lord King, who was the chairman of British Airways, seen very, very negatively. And so I think, you know, we do see this as a point of differentiation. We have, at the moment, I think the greatest business speaker on the planet is Paul Polman, who's the CEO of Unilever. Just watch some of his speeches on YouTube. This guy has amazing charisma and he is really able to whip an audience up. He's like the Barack Obama of the world of business. This is business communication at its best. Business communication at its worst is, there's a great story here, a guy called Gerald Ratner, who was the CEO of a company called Ratner's a high street jewellery chain in the early 1990s, who made a big speech at the Institute of Directors in London. And he said, people ask us how we can sell our products so cheaply, and I tell them, because they're crap. And he said this in public. Within 24 hours, it was front page of the papers. Within a week, £500 million had been knocked off the value of his company, which was publicly traded. Within 3 months, he was out and the company had to change its name, all because of a single off-the-hand joke in a speech. So that's the value that you can place on the good communicator versus the bad communicator as CEO. I think one of the big challenges is speaking to Gen Yers. I think this is a really big challenge, particularly when most CEOs are Gen Xers or even beyond. And it's tapping into the way that Gen Yers, I think, feel a much deeper kind of sense of social consciousness than some older people might do. It's speaking to their sense of togetherness, the more informal way that they communicate. That, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. It's speaking to that audience. And of course, that audience is going to grow in importance over the next 10, 15 years or so. There's a great CEO who I work with who has this fantastic technique which he once let me into. And he says that he always imagines that on the screen behind him, while he's making his presentation, there's hardcore pornography playing. And it's his role as speaker to be able to make sure people look at him and not what's going on the screen behind him. And this forces him, he looks at the audience, he's constantly looking around. And if he sees anyone look away, he takes it as a personal affront. And he will do something, I've seen him do it, to lure them in. And so he'll address them directly. He'll change the dynamic of his voice. He might start speaking very, very quietly, which forces people to listen. Or alternatively, he might start booming, which forces people to listen. He might tell a joke. He might pause unexpectedly, like that. He might throw in a story. There are all these different techniques which are kind of playing with the science of listener attention. The one thing that is guaranteed to send every audience to sleep is just the speaker that drifts on and on and on in this monotonous voice, never moving, never really changing their tone. And people have no incentive to listen. And all of the research shows that if people have no incentive to listen, they will not listen. And so good communicators need to get beyond that.